Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Welcome
back,
back,
everyone. Good to
It's
see
such a
everyone
pleasure
here.
to be here. Hello.
It's awesome. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you. We're back. It's the Social Pillar, ongoing conversation about the value of role-playing games, their crafts, cultures, and communities in the world. Coming to you from the very special place of Japan for myself and our special guest, which we're going to get to in just a moment today. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that we're coming to you from Aboriginal lands. When I'm streaming from Australia, I come to you from Darugland. Well, for today, I'm coming to you in Japan, home to Indigenous cultures of their own. So we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we stream to you from and pay our respects to elders past and present, extending those respects to any First Nations people who are watching us today. So welcome again. We are there's three of us, Forever DMs, who are joining the conversation, Games Masters for role-playing games. My name is Ian Zammit from Role Play Experience, and as I mentioned, coming to you from Tokyo for a change today.
Gosh.
We just got in, and I'm tired but happy, so it's looking very good. And I bring to you first one of our regular trio. That would be Thea over on my far right.
Hello.
How are you?
It's a pleasure to be here. Wonderful to see you as well. I don't know what you mean different. 3 GMs run this stream. We have 3 GMs on this stream. I noticed nothing different at all. I am OMGM. It is a pleasure to be here. I also stream very occasionally, though it's been a while. Run some games, do the things, as it is. Now, not trying to gaslight our wonderful community, you may notice that one of our usual members is notable by their absence. However, we do have the most excellent, esteemed, wonderful, kind of like a candle on a dark night, so you can kind of draw close and he spreads lights and warmth to everybody. Jared is with us tonight, the GM chef. However, he is in the background orchestrating things up there.
Thanks, man. Thanks for
He's
that,
there.
dude.
He's always watching.
That's the best way to put it as well. Yes. But thank you for that intro for Jared. He is here as well, so thanks, Jay, man. We're glad that you can be part of this because it's so good to also welcome our very, very good friend, a fellow Collecticon Games Master and veteran role-playing gamer living in Japan, which is part of the reason we went for this episode here. We'd like to welcome you, Atul. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Japan in itself is a TTRPG adventure. It's been amazing. And because, we're all such a fan of the game, you can understand why I'm probably going to be staying here for a while longer. I mean, about 3 weeks ago now, a deer bit me. That's great.
What? Oh my gosh. Are you now aware, dear?
A weird, like cancer.
What a terrible monster to be.
Awesome.
What a terrible animal to become half of, right? There's no movie, Beware the Were-Deer. It's just...
I feel that we need to have that, though, because it's the ultimate, dark horse, right? Well, dark... I don't even know what species they are.
Yes,
dark critter. There's the deer. Everyone's like, oh, it's a deer. It's so cute. It's tearing out sort of thing.
What? Are you okay? I've got to ask, what happened? Yeah.
Thinking about it, and I'm slightly insulted. Look, the day before I ate a lot of bad food, and in the morning I did a lot of walking. So when it happened, I didn't even feel it. Well, I thought it was a stitch, right? And then I go back to the hotel, I take a shower because it's really hot, and there's just this perfect tiny little bite mark on me. It's like, oh my God. But what's worse is it wasn't a carnivore. And that's the thing, right? If it's something that eats meat, that makes sense. Okay, I look like meat. This is perfect. But a grass eater saw me and was like, you're absolutely no threat. I'll take a piece.
Yeah. A herbivore decided that you were prey.
Right? It's like, where is the nearest notice board? I need to post up a quest because what the audacity.
Monstrous deer attacking travelers in the forest.
Assaulted my person.
Well, aside from things like local wildlife attacking you, there must be some appeal to Japan for you here, which is actually
That
part
is
of the
the
reason
appeal.
we're talking. That's part of the reason we're talking about this today. So for everyone out there, we particularly wanted to talk to you, Atul, because of your experience with Japanese culture, and in particular, tabletop role-playing games culture, which we can talk further on. We wanted to find out your experience of that, being from, we're from Australian background, from what we've seen as our experience from Collecticon and how we run role-playing games, which is very much dominated by Dungeons and Dragons, for example. And also just generally your experience of play here, the culture, what people like to play, and learn a bit more about that, some takeaways about what we can learn. So maybe we start off with that, particularly about the biting incident. We can move from there.
You mean the deer. You meant the deer. Right.
That's
okay.
We should have gone over with you before the stream some of the terms of service. We'll stick with deer biting, not that kind of stream, though I'm sure there's a market.
Well, what brought you here in the first place? And is it something you'd like to continue staying here for a long time?
Well, I mean, when I was in high school, I was terrified of my Japanese teacher. We all were. She was this angry woman from New Zealand. And people thought I was being super. She was raised in Japan. She was an embassy kid. And people thought I was being super dramatic, but I always told my friends and my family, look, she's going to quit teaching and she'll join something like security or the armed forces. Like about 5 years later, she quit teaching and she's now a deck commander in the New Zealand Navy somewhere. So somebody owes me a Coke.
You saw it.
But I was terrified of her, right?
You saw it.
Yeah, I was terrified of her. No, my parents thought I was lazy. It's like, no, you just need to work hard. So I thought, all right, I'll play to my strengths. I'm bad at languages. I've been trying to study Japanese while I'm here, and it's helpful, but bad at languages. I was scared of her, so I started reading up everything I could on the country, hoping to, gain points that way. And I ended up finding this one story. It was tiny. I remember it because it was like 200 words. It was a story called the Chushingura or the Gishi. It's known as the 47 Ronin in English. Yeah. Keanu Reeves did a terrible movie about it a while ago, but it's Keanu Reeves. Yeah. So, all right.
Yeah. It's balances.
Right? But it was a wonderful story. I won't bang on too much about it because I could. I went to the shrine where it started and I was verklempt. I was like, okay. Aww. Not in front of the Japanese people, but this is kind of cool. But it's a story about people giving up 2 to 3 years of their life, making themselves look like absolutely terrible people in order to try and do the right thing. And I was a typical teenager, right? Like I was selfish as all. I was angry. I was really self-involved. Sorry to any teenagers who might be watching it, but I really was. I was that stereotype.
I think we're all like that as teenagers. Yeah.
But reading the story started getting me asking questions. It's like, man, if I had to give 2 years of my life just to anything, making myself seem bad, what would be worth it? What are the right reasons? Why did they do it? Because in the story, they got punished anyway, and punishment in Japan means... So, yeah. Even if you could argue that they did the right thing, and this is a common argument still here among the academic community in Japan, did they do the right thing? Was it actually the right thing? Should they have waited? Should they have gone further? The point remains, they took the punishment regardless, and that was just wow to teenage me. And it started a fascination with Japan and Japanese culture. And the coolest thing is, Japan is filled with so many of those stories. It's been insane. Wow. So the last 18 months has been me wandering up and down mountains through different castles in the middle of nowhere, risking deer bites and terrible were curses.
I mean, that's fair. I understand.
Yeah.
We've seen a
Hearing
lot of
all these fantastic stories. And what I've noticed, and I guess we can go into this, is it's almost always been about service to something. And that's the key distinction I've noticed in TTRPGs here.
It sounds like the culture, like you were saying, really rubbed off on you when you were younger, and you really got a sense of that. You said it, the sense of service. I find that a lot with a lot of Asian cultures as well, where there's a sense to community. Service to community is a very important part of culture, and particularly Japanese. I've had similar effects from stories. Particularly, I watched a number of Akira Kurosawa films at a very formative time when I was growing up, and was like, "This is phenomenal," and watching some things like Akira, the manga that was the anime eventually that became, but basically learning from that cultural influence had an effect on me as well. I know what you mean. Part of the reason I wanted to come here as well.
Look, you're there right now.
I'm fascinated by yeah, which is exactly it as well. And so it's like looking at going to the next stage of this is like looking at like the role-playing games side of things, which is what we're here for. So have you had any experience of playing role-playing games here? What's it been like? Does it kind of reflect that cultural context that appealed to you as well?
Well, I should preface this by saying it would help if I was better at the language. So I stumble along. Luckily, playing a barbarian is my favorite class, right? So it's like I already sound like a bit of convergent
decision making. Nice.
It's halfway there. So I've done a few small games, and one of my favorite things is sort of in the Japanese context, the focus on the social pillar part of D&D. Shameless plug.
Amazing. Well done. And we're not even paying you for that.
Oh, no.
Oh, did we not talk about that part of the contract? Ian, ask the question.
Never the social side, yes.
But
it's funny, you mentioned something about that. Yeah. Or just saying that awesome document you sent through in the lead up to this, because it was so good having that conversation to get you here so we had a chance to talk about it. TTRPG does not mean tabletop role-playing game in Japan, which we didn't know.
No, it's kind of cool because I was making that assumption and they're like, what about the table? No, in Japan, it stands for table talk because the emphasis is on the conversation. And a lot of the TTRPGs in Japan are focused towards having a good conversation with people.
Yeah.
Interesting. What is TTRPG in Japanese? Put you on the spot here.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry. The connection is...
Oh, right. I'm sorry you're dropping out. I can't hear you.
See what we can do. But did your experience
we'll
in that?
At the end.
Yeah.
It sounds like I'm being totally racist here, and I apologize, but it is literally table talku game.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, there's so many words that have been pulled across.
Yeah. Because TTRPGs are a Western influence. They didn't really become a thing in Japan until Japan saw how big it was becoming overseas. There were some around, but they weren't so popular. But now they're merchandise for almost every anime. If you have a particular anime that you like, chances are there's a TTRPG for it.
Okay.
That's been. Do you think that's a recent thing as well? The shift to actual role-playing game versions of anime.
It's a good question. I think there's always been a love for merchandise and characters, and so I was in advertising and law before I came to Japan, and what we classify Japan as is a high context culture. There's always a consideration of other people and what their needs are, how they might view you. So while this sounds great, the downside is people are very shy. And it's really hard to get people to engage very quickly. So it goes very carefully and slowly. So while there are a bunch of TTRPGs, one for every anime, I'd really say it's more of a recent thing that it's taken up popularity. I'm surprised to learn Critical Role was a thing here, but wow, it's big here too.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would probably, if
fans, man.
That's really fascinating. Well, it's funny because you said the social side, which Critical Role has really championed, I think, has been a big part of that. So I wonder if that's a big part of that kind of play. So, yeah. Do you think that would be part
a major? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
A major struggle with Japan, and I think not so much in other cultures, but definitely in Japan, is the social isolation. More and more people are becoming hikikomori, shut-ins. There's less of a desire to socialize and to interact with people beyond a screen, right? Irony.
There are benefits to be able to connect like this.
Yeah.
I hear what you mean. This is big, I think, particularly after COVID as well, that grew, I heard, across Japan's culture, but also in many cultures like Australia as well.
And you're a teacher, aren't you? You might have seen it in your students, like that elongated isolation from other people had its own impact. So when people see things like Critical Role and how well those guys get along together, there's that, hey, I would love to have that experience. Within the Japanese context, it's less about the adventure as a whole, but more about that friendship between people. It's like, wow, look at how they're helping each other. I would like to have someone like that, which is a small but a key difference.
Yeah.
It
That's
definitely is. I think it's interesting for you too. I was going to ask on specific experiences for you that you've had, because you said it has been particularly challenged to find D&D groups, you said as well here. But if you can think of one or two of the experiences you had, just your recollection of that and what it was like and what the focus was when you played or the style of play. Do you have any kind of key memories that you remember about those experiences?
So, like anyone who plays D&D, I have 1 or 2 or 6 sets of dice on me whenever I go play a game. And I asked around, hey, I'm not good at Japanese, but would there be a group who'd like to teach me how to play Sword World, which is one of the major TTRPGs here?
Okay.
And I showed up with my bag of dice with my minis, and they're like, what is that? Like, why do you have so many? What do you mean? It's like, you only need 2d6. What?
Scandalous.
The outrage. But again, the focus was less on having a dice for every single thing, for every specific situation, and having really simple rules so you could get to the conversation faster. And that helped me. And again, it threw me off, one, because I had all this stuff with me, and they're like, no, it's fine. We really just sit around and talk and drink. And it's like, you only ever need 2d6. It's like for everything. Yeah. Strength check, 2d6. Attack, 2d6.
Wow.
That sounds fascinating. Yeah, go ahead, Thea.
I was just going to say, what was that system again?
So that's part of the Sword World system, and part of the attraction of it is that it only uses 2d6, that it's super simple. And a lot of people grew up watching the anime Record of Lodos, so there's a lot of familiarity there. Yeah.
Have a talk a bit about that then, Sword World. What's your experience of that? Because from what you know about it as well, I've only learned about this from you since we started talking in the last few weeks. But you said particularly Record of Lodos War and the Sword World role-playing game that became from that is huge. Like Dungeons & Dragons is not really a thing in Japan in comparison to this. Yeah. But
I tried so hard setting up a group, and it's like, oh, all right. Everyone's like, how much time do you have? Okay.
So this is also, if you want to talk a bit about from your experience of it, but this is also was locally made. This is an RPG that was made here.
Mm.
So, Sword World comes from an anime called Record of Lodos. If you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. It's maybe a bit old now, but it's still fantastic. It watches like a D&D adventure. I think if you've enjoyed watching the Vox Machina series or things like the Dragon Prince, you'll still enjoy things like Record of Lodos. So many surprising twists and turns which I didn't see coming, and it's fantastic. Again, like the Japanese preference for Critical Role, it's more focused on things like talking and relationships between the characters. So, like a lot of anime, if you grew up watching it, like I love Dragon Ball Z, but even I can admit that there were episodes where in a 20-minute episode, they spent maybe 17 minutes discussing the issue.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That is
I'd say really amazing fighting, but like, what? That's impossible. Why? Well, obviously, it must be because XYZ.
I've seen it from my experience as well for anime in particular. In Japanese anime, there's sometimes some really interesting philosophical discussions that take up an entire episode, and it's like doesn't progress plot in a huge way necessarily. No. And that's the point. It's actually, it is the discussion of this engagement, either philosophical or relationships. And you just reminded me, I grew up a while ago in the 80s in particular. There was a role-playing game, or actually it was more a war game, which was Battletech. It was huge. But Robotech...
I played Battletech.
Yeah, it was huge. But Robotech, which was the series that came from it, was so huge, and it was so much about the relationships in that show and just about how people related. And the fighting happened now and then. I remember watching as a kid going, why are there any more ship battles? What's this about this relationship between this character and are they going to go out with her or are they going to go out with her? And I was like, and it was weird at first, but then I went, this is just different. It's not what I'm used to, particularly from Western culture. And it was fascinating. Yeah.
I'm just going
to... Oh, go on.
No, I was just going to say, no, make your point and then I'll ask the question. Just got a couple of questions from chat, that's all.
All right. So I love character design in Japan. Like anyone who's seen shows knows that it's like, wow, it's so detailed, it's so unique. And there are things like I was watching... a mech TTRPG, right? And some of these things are wonderful. Like you can see the designs that they've got so many things that they can do and use, and it's almost rarely ever used. It's just kind of there as set dressing while they talk about what's happening. Eventually, they will use it as part of the plot, but it's the build up to why they're doing what they do.
Interesting.
So it's like, so you have a giant gun shaped like a bull on fire. Why aren't you using it?
And obviously we're talking about just sort of like your experience. We're not trying to generalize to all Japanese players.
Please don't. At least until I can speak Japanese.
Well, I'm sure you speak very good Japanese. But we have a question from chat from the players that you've experienced. Do you find that they held a lot of culture in the character creation? So I guess bring a lot of that background culture, or do they try and kind of branch out into different things? I mean, that's a very complex question.
Yeah, look, I think like with everyone, it depends on the person, right? Whether how unique or original you want to be, how niche you want to be. What I like in Japan, and I think this is part of the reason Record of Lodos's Sword World did so well, is that there are so many homage characters. It's like, I want to build a character who is in love with this character from another show. I want a character who fights like Ruro and Kenshin. And it's like,
that is
so it's
interesting.
building on the previous stories that have happened so far. Is it that kind of thing?
Yeah. And it makes sense because legacy is a huge thing in Japan.
I think I'd love to be able to play this. I've been looking it up too. So I was thinking following this, particularly now I'm in Tokyo, is I'm trying to check out, I think Yellow Submarine is a shop that I'm going to go to here. Just a few stops away, just near Tokyo. Tokyo Station, that is. And but I want to get a copy of that. I want to see about playing it, and I love the idea of simpler mechanics, so that it is actually more about that whole. I mean, I love the role playing side of things, the social pillar as well, because I do feel sometimes D&D can be bogged down in the kind of the mechanics of things when it comes to the combat side of things, and it does. There's a bit. Sometimes it feels like, how do you balance those two things when it comes to the social side? So I want to check that out. You mentioned, and thank you as well for Semi-Slick for that question, and for Thea for bringing that up. Please, guys, if you're out there listening to this, we'd love to hear your questions about role-playing game experience when it comes to Japanese TTRPGs or culture, particularly as you mentioned, Atul, if there's any RPGs that have come about from anime in the last 10, 20 years that you guys are interested in, we'd love to hear about this. But to lead on from that, you talked about probably Sword World, as you said, is the big high fantasy RPG. Basically, that is the most popular thing that Japan has here for role playing games, and D&D's not even in the picture for that kind of thing. So that's interesting.
Such small shelf space. I was so shocked. Like we're used to Sydney, right? Going in and it's shelves of stuff. Here, it's barely
clones of D&D and stuff like that. Well, it's funny that, because that isn't so big, but there is a Western world story that has been picked up hugely over here as an RPG.
Oh, now I'm intrigued.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so Call of Cthulhu, to my surprise, is
interesting.
A huge thing here. And it took a little while for me to find out why, because, again, people are shy, and unless you've known them or you've been playing with them for a while, they're a little bit hesitant. But, I mean, it turns out, while Call of Cthulhu is arguably more complicated than D&D, I would say D&D is probably a smidge more difficult, but Call of Cthulhu deals with higher concepts most of the time. But
I'd agree with that.
The thing about Call of Cthulhu here is that it tells you how you're feeling. We already discussed about, the removal of mechanics, making conversation easier. Here we take it a step further, and it's the removal of that high context culture fear. Is what I'm going to do going to impact or inconvenience the other people with me? Here, it's like, no, you don't get a choice. You feel insane. Okay, I'm insane.
Right. I mean, we've actually, I was going to say, we've talked about Call of Cthulhu and other horror games here. Why is it you think that in particular, though, seems to have taken off? I mean, there's a number of horror games out there.
Oh God! First, as a genre, horror does really well here. There's so much stuff.
Interesting. Okay.
I teach senior high school, and some of the stuff my kids show me, it's like, am I going to get in trouble for this?
Oh no.
Aside from a general like of a culture of that sort of genre, rather, I think because, again, Japanese culture in very general terms is more reserved, because there's that consideration for the effect you'll have on other people, of what you'll do for or to other people. Call of Cthulhu deals with very strong emotions, which in such a context is pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like, I generally like the idea of carrying a giant great axe around, but if somebody were to hand me a giant great axe, I would start swinging. I know that's dangerous, but you would be using it to make the swooshing sounds. It's like if we're handed a lightsaber, we'll do
that's absolutely, you have to make the sounds. You and McGregor made the sounds on set. Let's yes.
Yeah, they did.
Yes.
They said that the director stopped them, said, guys, you need to stop making the sounds. They're like, were we doing that? No, you couldn't help it.
Yeah.
So good. You would do it though. Yeah, completely.
I mean, it's a human urge. I understand.
You're handed the feeling, which takes a lot of the guesswork out. It's like being given a goal. I am insane, ergo I will do this. With a Western TTRPG, especially with Dungeons and Dragons, we as DMs might do something like, and this is something I recognize, I might say something like, oh, you start feeling insane, or you start feeling a strange presence in your mind, and it's up to the person to interpret what it is. And that can take a bit of time. Whereas here, it's straight to the point. No, you've gone insane. Okay.
I find that fascinating, particularly because I was getting into role-playing games in my youth, coming across Dungeons and Dragons and very much about the combat and you make your decisions. But I was so interested in the story side. When Ravenloft came out, that was actually so drawn. Clearly, there were very many hints from Call of Cthulhu there. They had madness as a mechanic as well. They had fear and horror where it would overtake you and you were not able to control it, but you could role play it. So therefore, your relationships to the story, to the other characters, to the villains of the piece were so much more important. And that, I think, actually, I can see the similarities with something about Call of Cthulhu. And like you said, Japanese culture in particular, there's that need for that emotional connection to the story and to the other players and characters. I don't think it's a... Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, when you mentioned Ravenloft, that's exactly right, because as people who have run those games before, the idea of Ravenloft is you're probably going to lose, right? So you just kind of have to do your best. And I think that's a large part of the reason Call of Cthulhu does so well here. It's like, there's a really good chance you're going to die. What are you going to do on the way there? And it's like, all right, cool.
It's interesting. There's an element of nihilism to it almost. And I wonder whether that's part of the appeal because, and I've got an incredibly limited experience with Japanese anime, some of sort of Evangelion, Akira, obviously, but in everything that I've experienced, even something like Sailor Moon, I can't remember what the Japanese name of it is, but there's an undercurrent of nihilism. And I wonder if that's something that you've noticed in the games or in that kind of the people who play games, if you've had enough experience to comment on that.
Well, look, making every attempt not to offend anyone, and please take it for what it is. Japan is actually struggling with that right now as a collective culture, and it's a difficult time for them politically, economically, especially post-COVID. Not that anyone else has had more or less suffering, but it's that thing, right? People look at it and what is there to think about in the future? What is there to kind of hope for? And I think part of the reason people like these games is it allows them to explore that sort of thought indirectly, which is why those friendships are so important. Like in a game all about nihilism, it's like it doesn't matter how strong or how smart you are. Cthulhu's going to knock on that door in 20 minutes. We need an answer. It starts asking you the questions like it did for me when I was a teenager. It starts asking those questions. Well, what do we look at now? What is important now?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that you talk about it because I guess going back to your comments about how the kind of the gamers is very much about relationships. If there is this undercurrent of nihilism and that, everything's going to be bad no matter what we do, what does matter? And what matters is relationships.
What we have.
Right is the only which is that move from nihilism to existentialism. I don't mean to make this about philosophy, but it's true, right?
It is what it is. That's fantastic. The limited experience I have, because the film, both role-playing games, but also film, we talked a bit before, part of my influence as I was growing up was very much Akira Kurosawa. I grew up with a fair amount of anime in particular, like Akira we mentioned there.
No, that's a great example.
Akira. Things I found out, so particularly after the Second World War and after the bomb went off, the effect of that on the culture here in Japan was inconceivable. It's almost unable to talk about. And films like Mad Max, when it came out, the apocalypse and people trying to live after it and the relationships of things, Mad Max was huge here. massive.
I was really surprised.
It was nuts.
Everyone knows Fury Road. It's Tom Hardy.
Wow.
Yeah, okay.
They love it. Absolutely. And then you see, if you've seen Akira, the bomb going off, that is a very powerful image that repeats in the film a number of times, and about what does this mean? Is it a new beginning? Is it something that we're going to learn from, that we can evolve from, perhaps? Who knows? Can we be better? And so I think this is purely supposition from experience that I have as well, and from I identify with, is the idea of, well, if that could go off at any point, and you've got something like our relationships and us trying to survive every day, looking at something like Cthulhu, where you've got elder gods who are incomprehensible and could simply come in and crush us at any point, I completely get why that is just like Godzilla. It's something way beyond how powerful we are, and it could just happen. But how do we deal with it in our day-to-day lives, and with that hanging over us? It's amazing. It's powerful, and very existential. I think that's a key theme of all of these stories as well.
Yeah, it's that whole thing about something bad is going to happen, and in a high context culture, compared to most Western cultures, in a high context culture, your thought is immediately of the good of the group, and you start trying to make sure of that. Now, I'm not trying to put people or geographic locations on a pedestal, but I see this with a lot of my students. Like, if you put them on the spot where they're isolated from each other, they freeze up. Even if I know, and I'm pretty sure they know that they have the right answer, it's more comforting for them to consult with people. So I give them the freedom to do that in my classes. You will see this in TTRPG play here, where they will, even though it's pretty obvious that thing is about to eat me, I have a gun, what do I do? It's like, you should shoot it. Okay, I'm going to shoot it.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I think I would really like to talk to some Japanese people who play role-playing games, so we can hear from them what it is to play it, what it is to them to experience it and to think of these things. Just on that link, though, I just thought about the whole Cthulhu thing. The whole aim of that game is to survive, and it's you literally have to be able to work together, or you're screwed.
Yeah.
So it's so much about the relationships of these different people trying to survive, I guess, together, which is part of the fun of it. Yeah.
No, it's really interesting.
And that's the thing, right? Like when you do work together to survive, you become closer together. And I might have mentioned in that document I sent to you, one of my key pet peeves about playing Dungeons and Dragons is that it can be very procedural. Player A does this, then player B does this. I'm not a very highbrow source, but there was this comic book I remember reading a little while ago where the implication was made about an opposing team is like, the reason we're going to win is that we fight together. They fight together alone. And I thought that was a key lesson. Everyone does their own thing just in the same space. Whereas the other team uses each other to do impossible things like beat an elder god, right?
I think that's a really interesting point. Do you think your experiences over there might or will potentially influence the way you approach games, or running games?
I hope so, because look, the social pillar, that's 3 mentions. That's 3 mentions.
No, I'm so impressed. You've mentioned it more than we managed to, and I think that's great. Are you gunning for GM Chef's job? Because I feel like
I'll settle for just like a web banner ad, just me scrolling across the screen.
Scrolling across the screen.
But the social pillar, as is often discussed, is one of the least, one of the most difficult parts to get right in D&D, right? I mean, we all talk about how the exploration pillar is the least used, and that's fine. But I think the social pillar is what makes a really great game. That's 4. That's 4.
I'm so impressed. Sorry, Jared, we found someone else. It's been great.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Give me a hat I can put on backwards.
For anybody in chat, we actually still have a feed of Jared, and we can see him sitting there with his hat backwards. But anyway, so yeah, we were saying about things that you can sort of take away. So that social pillar. What do you mean by that social pillar? You mean the relationships?
I'm keeping track of this now. That's what, seven times?
I think that potentially, yeah.
Okay. In the tally chat, if you're watching, if you can tally it in the chat, that'd be great.
So one of my favorite things about Critical Role is their thing with doors, right? There was an episode where in a 3-hour session, they spent a good 40 minutes between the three of them trying to figure out how to open a door. And that was fantastic. Like it was just the relationship between the three of them, somebody whose entire job was figuring out how to open doors. There was somebody who was skilled in mechanical objects. There was somebody with magic, and it became a thing between the three of them. Just, why can't you open the door? You do it then. It's like, all right, I'll try this. Okay, that didn't work. All right, what did he do? And I think that's a fantastic example. On the face of it, that's a terrible game, right? Spend 20 minutes trying to get through a common wooden door. But because of the relationship those three had, I've totally forgotten who it was. It was Percy.
It was Vax, and it was Scanlon. Yes.
Yeah.
Scanlon. I was going to say it had to be Scanlon in there somewhere.
It had to be Scanlon, right? But because of the three of them, because of that relationship, they had a great time.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that, because I think that's something, just reflecting on the way that I run games, is I quite like the mechanics, but that's because I run a lot of one-shots with players who are relatively new. And I think the mechanics are very good to fall back on when you can't guarantee there's going to be a connection or a relationship between people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think that trying to not push for that, because I think that comes across as a little bit artificial, but being more sensitive to that as a DM and really picking up on those moments, I think is something that would be incredibly useful.
You can't force people to be nice to get along with each other. Absolutely right.
Yeah. I think
I was going to say, I saw Jared's mentioned in the chat as well, playing role as the Curse of Strahd and having an episode, having a session where you actually just never roll a die. You actually just get a chance to interact.
Yeah.
I value those sessions. I've been thinking about what you've been saying to Atul and Thea about engaging in players. And from Atul, if you've seen this experience of how the players here in Japan would very much, it's how they interact and how they build on what's happening with them in particular, that is valuable to them. I found it very interesting in a lot of games I played for young people coming up. So we're talking like mainly teens actually, but also into adults. There's so much about what they do that I want to have a moment to do this, and I have this, and it may have nothing to do with what the rest of the party's doing at all. And it can sometimes be completely contra to what the mission is. Literally, it'll be some non sequitur in the middle of like, this is happening, and this person said, oh, I'll try this and this. What do you do? I'm going to try and find my bow and arrow at that person over there. And you're like, why?
What?
Like, because I can do this, and I haven't had a chance. And it's like, you listening to what's happening here, and it's clearly there's. And I mean, this is honestly, it's a very Western thing. Individualism is a very important thing in Western society, and the ability to stand out. The problem with that, of course, is it doesn't allow for the access to the how do I think of, how do I consider the group? How do I consider what's at stake with the people who are right in front of me? So
and I think that's something that we've talked about before as well, is I think actually we talked about it with our level 20 game, but one of the things that we liked is that we were all working together to support the story. And the fact that we called that out, I think, is a reflection on some of the things that we can encounter, is that you're not always going to have everybody working together. You know, main character syndrome. We talk about that. Yeah. I feel like in a more collective culture that's something that is maybe less of a challenge. I mean, I'm making very sweeping assumptions here.
There's usually one strong personality, one or two, and people tend to support that. It's either choices by committee where they have a discussion about what to do, or there's one strong personality people will end up deferring to. It's strange to watch. It's either or.
Interesting. Have you played a lot over there? Have you had a chance?
Not as much as I'd like, because again, I am about 2 feet taller and 20 shades browner than everyone. So there's a little bit of hesitation, right?
Fair.
I made the newspaper because, well, like the local newspaper, because I heard about a New Year's event that sounded really cool, and I went and I showed up. I was maybe the only person under the age of about 60 who was there, and everyone was so small but so polite.
Oh, bless.
And somebody showed me a picture like about a month later, and it's like, oh, there's me. You can tell.
You did stand out somewhat.
You can.
Or stand up. It is a generalization, but I found the same thing. I'm a relatively tall person, so I go out in Australia and I am usually one of the taller people, generally one of the taller women. So yeah, in Japan, where the average height is a little bit shorter, I feel what it is like to be so much taller than people around you.
I have accidentally run into so many people because honestly, I do not see them until I turn around and I whack into them.
Oh no. I mean, to be fair though, you didn't see a deer biting you, so I'm not sure what your passive perception sits at.
I was trying to feed it, okay? And I think that might have been the mistake.
Well, you clearly
This is going to keep coming back, Atul. It will be there. It is fascinating. So
I love it.
No, I want a revenge quest.
Atul, the deer slayer.
The deer slayer.
And at the end, it turns out that it wasn't the deer after all. Or you become, oh my gosh, you can become the deer.
I was the monster.
You were the monster after all, and they were just trying to make you one of them.
I was thinking about it. It's like, oh my God, it would have been better because for my birthday, I decided to do this very famous hike in Kobe, right? And you're warned to be careful on the mountain. It's steep. There are wild animals. It's
wild deer.
Be careful. Not deer. You get about halfway up the mountain. This is a 6-hour hike. You get up about 3 hours up there in the middle of nowhere. Limited like cell phone and Wi-Fi assistance. You have to download a special app so people know where you are, just in case. In the middle of this dark forest, very little light, overcast, and all it needed was thunder and lightning, is this giant sign telling you to beware of boars, right? And that's fine.
Boars are terrifying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The drawing on this sign is these 2 people being threatened by this gigantic boar, easily the size of a house. It is bright red.
Oh my gosh.
It has fangs and it has claws. And I'm looking at it, it's like, why is this halfway up the mountain? It's too late now.
You're already committed. Oh no.
It's the inevitable, that something bad's going to happen. We're just making sure this is very likely going to happen. It's like, okay, at least I know what it is.
That's the difference between a warning.
Earlier.
It's the difference between a warning and foreshadowing.
Yeah, that's it.
This
I was just thinking like the ball from
you.
Yeah.
Princess Mononoke is what it made me think of. If you've seen that, there's a giant boar in that as well. I was thinking that's just terrifying. So, yeah.
He hand drew over 10,000 frames of that himself. We were lucky to go to an exhibition here to see it.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
It's insane.
I'm going to the museum. I'm going to the museum. Yeah. Look, that's actually, if that could be made into a role-playing game as well, I've been using elements of that in my own as well, because it's Mononoke, because it's just phenomenal. And it has the importance of being able to see different people's points of views and work together is just the key point. Yeah, it's right in there. So this is, look, we are getting towards the end. So I thought getting towards a wrap-up point here to ask you, it sounds like you love living here and you love the people and the culture, and it sounds like you want to continue. What is it that you feel you want to try to learn more about, or if you wanted to pick up on role-playing games, what is it you would like to be able to gain and bring into your own gaming?
Well, first, I'd like to be able to speak Japanese. It's embarrassing, guys. It's like there's always a delay. It's like a really bad internet connection in real life, just like a super high ping, just like da 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 da. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my God, I know the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what I'd like to bring most is what's important as a DM in Japan, I think, is that patience and facilitating a conversation. A lot of people will come with you with a character, come to you with a character rather, and they'll ask, hey, is this okay to play? And what you'd need to do is remember those little details. Hey, Mayuki is actually very good at medicine. Maybe there is something she would like to do to help. And that's, of course, something we can benefit in our Western games as well.
Yeah.
Part of the social pillar. That's eight.
I'm impressed. That's it. You're hired. 100%.
I find that funny that you say that, because I haven't had a chance to play a game with you either, so I'm keen to as well. We should get a chance to do that sometime.
Yeah.
I don't think we've played a game together.
I haven't played with you either.
No, so
we've all played D&D in the same room several times.
We have played D&D in the same room several times, yes.
The nature of all being GMs, though. So, but I was thinking from your style, I would guess, and Thea, I know this is for you and for Jared very much, that how much the social pillar is important. I know that for me, the way I run games for D&D, you can run it any way you want, but looking at that as a particular one, I'm thinking of one game I'm about to do as well as a one-shot, and there's a group of people, they have played, they want to run a game for their DMs who can play with them so they can just enjoy it. And I said, my encouragement was like, have a character, if you want to be D&D, play a class, something that you really want to learn, so you want to really go into it. But something just, I don't want you to be restricted by rules. What is a character you want to play? What's something fun about it? Bring that in. And then literally, they've all come to me over the last couple of months, and we've got it together, and they've each got very specific, unique, and stylistically different things that you're like, I know I have to bring that into the story somehow. I have to ensure that gets met in some way. That are literally just moments when you mention it, they'll be like, oh, I can do something here. Or, it's so fun. I actually find that fun to build it into a game, because it's not just fan service. It's like we're kind of creating the story together, and there's that value of that communal thing. You guys find that as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, look, this might be a bit unpopular, because when I did it, I actually got the idea from Matt Colville's writing. But when I started putting together my D&D group in Australia, I actually did interviews. It's like, look, this is the sort of game I'd like to play. These are the things I'd like to incorporate. I'd rather not do these things. And this helped me get a group of people who are on similar wavelengths. And we've been playing together for the better part of 6 years now, which is unheard of in D&D. Well, not unheard of, but very rare in D&D, right? Finding a group of people, or more to the point, not like the perfect group of people, but setting those expectations so you can come from the same place, which is part of a high context culture. Like everybody knows what's okay and what isn't, how to help people, what other people are doing. That is a good part of setting up a good game, which emphasizes the social pillar, which leads to a good game. Is that 9? Can we make it 10?
9. I mean, can you make it 10? That is the question. It's all down to you. This is your
Keep going.
moment.
Stay on the flow. Stay on the flow.
Thank you, Ian.
But I hear that side of it as well. I love that you said high context culture. That's actually something I want to take out of this. What does that mean? What does that actually what that focuses on, and when it comes to looking at what your group is and how you can apply that to when you're engaging people. I completely agree. I feel like I want to ensure the people, if you're going to have a group of people you play with for a while, I want to know that we're going to be on the same page, that we have the same interests that we want to play with, that we have the same style of game we want to play. And I know there's some types of game I don't want to play. It's just not that kind of thing for me. Like some people love Grimdark. I've grown up with a lot of Warhammer. I've done Grimdark. I don't need to do that anymore. But some people love it. And it's like, good. It's just not something for me. And I think that's really good for people to say that ahead of time. Yeah.
And that's totally valid. And remember, like I'm going to sound entitled as all, but as DMs, we put a lot of work into this. It takes a lot of time, and that's before the 3+ hour sessions, right?
Yeah.
If we're going to commit that time to something, it might as well be a good time.
Yeah, I've always said that the DM should be having as much fun as the players. It's something that I see on a lot of notice boards, and it's like, oh, I'm really unhappy with my group and I feel like I'm doing all this and not feeling, well, why are you with that group? This is a game that we're all playing. And that's something that I think that I hope I've been able to, but with my groups and bringing in my players, is that it is everybody has a clear expectation of the kind of game that I want to run. And I want to have fun. And I want there to be those relationships. And if that's not going to suit people, that's 100% fine. I am not the DM for them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. That freedom and respect. It's that respect, isn't it? Just to say, and it's okay to say, hey, it's not for me. It's okay.
Absolutely.
Like, we can still get on. This just isn't for me.
Get along. That's fine.
Yeah. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, actually, I don't like this play style. This is not for me. Cool. That's fine. That's getting into a whole lot of different stories. That's all right. He's still there. I hope he's still there.
Social pillar is weakening.
Our social pillar is lost a particular member. Actually, no, this is so quick peek behind the curtain for anyone that is interested. The software that we use normally aligns people very well, and occasionally will drop out a camera. However, occasionally it will drop out a link, and we have to reset a few things. So it's very fortunate that tonight we have our background producer who has made it all work.
I seriously think he's just reminding us this is why he's here.
He's reminding us, well, this was not a tech issue. This was 100% intentional. We understand now. Or it was that whole,
he was emphasizing his point.
Or, at the end of like nightclubs or a performance, you flicker the lights.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, instead of flickering the lights, we flickered the light of our lives, the shining star that keeps us on track is Ian. So we flickered Ian.
I think actually, I like the idea.
I didn't realize it until I was almost a year here. In Japan, a lot of places will play Auld Lang Syne to tell you to hurry up and get out.
Oh, how interesting. We don't have a music track.
Version, but how?
That's a really good thing. Well, it's so popular around the world, I think. But when you were saying it was the flickering of the lights, I actually thought it was like
there's so many little differences that have started creeping its way into the sort of the adventures that I try to run, right? And it's been great. There's so many shrines with so many stories. If you are ever in Osaka, there is a shrine called the Shrine of Samuhara, which is the Japanese version of Lord of the Rings. And I will never stop telling people about it because it's one of my favorite stories here. Yeah.
A link or something to the base, like a wiki or something like that of it, that'd be fantastic. Love to look it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you send a link of Samuhara, is it called? Samuhara? Can you hear me? Can you hear me at all?
And you'll get a lot of
Yeah, we can hear you. We got you.
In Japanese things and Japanese games as well. There's actually a lot of silences, which was unusual to me as a player.
That's interesting because sometimes we feel compelled to fill silences. As we would have noticed in this particular conversation, we're also keen every now and then we might just talk over each other, and that's fine. We have 2 ears. We can definitely process more than one auditory input.
Yeah.
However,
probably good if you wrap up because I don't know if Atul can hear me at the moment. So
we can hear you, Ian. I don't know if you can hear us, but yes, we are pretty much getting to the end of our time here tonight. It is our time to wrap up this social pillar. However, we will have discussions going on in the Discord if anyone would like to hang out. I just want to thank you, Atul. Thank you so much for spending time sharing your experiences with us tonight. It is so wonderful to see you again. It has been
Thank you
quite a while
me.
for me, maybe less time for the others, but you are a shining smile, and you have this really lovely warm energy, and we really appreciate having that in the stream. But thank you again.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's lovely to talk about it with people who are so passionate about it and don't give me grief for having 36 dice, at least.
Hey, I'm not going to judge you for your dice. That's not going to happen unless they're nicer than mine, in which case we're going to have a conversation.
The big manly
so
dice.
we can share.
You can get them as well. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly, because I want those dice as well. But we are going to wrap up. We will be back next week. We are slowly skidding down in our knees with sparks flying out towards the end of this season, but we're not quite there yet. What are we doing next week?
Well, on that note, real briefly, we're working out if there's going to be a guest for next
come
week.
to Japan, play Sword World.
See,
I would love to come to Japan. Hang on, you're in Japan.
I'm already here.
Trying to work out.
Yeah.
We're so trying to work out if we could actually meet in person.
Bring your 2d6s and let's go.
Yes. Maybe next week it might be a guest. I think we're just going to confirm that. But it may be something else. Keep a watch, guys. But the main thing from me is I may not be part of it.
I feel like that's
I'm going to be off on. I'm going to be walking on a mountaintop and not anywhere near any.
Yeah,
any
we're not going to have any.
Yeah, so I'll be away.
The backbone of the organisation will not be here, but we will do our best to make it work. We've got the links to our socials and to our Discord in the chats. Please do come check us out. Ian, we're going to miss you terribly next week, but I hope you have a wonderful time. Thank you for joining us from Japan. Thank you both for joining us from Japan. Thank you, wonderful Jared, for manipulating things behind the scenes. Wait, that sounds concerning, but we're not going to unpack that. Yeah, we're just gonna roll on through. We are going to raid out tonight. Thank you, everybody in chat. It's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you, everybody who might be listening to this either on the podcast or on YouTube. It's coming. It's honestly coming. We're a step closer. But do come check us out. We love you all. We love each other. And I don't just say that. I mean it. You are all wonderful humans.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll see you next time.
Be creative.
Any last words?
Thank you, Atul.
Social killer.
Social killer.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. And thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Bye.